It started as a routine patrol for Officer Haley, just another quiet day on the job, until she heard it. A faint but persistent growl coming from an alley behind a convenience store. What she found there was a dog fiercely guarding a brown bag, and what was inside that bag left Haley stunned, fighting back tears. Little did she know this discovery was just the beginning of something far more dangerous and unexpected. Stay tuned to uncover the shocking truth behind the dog's mysterious behavior. If you're a dog lover, don't forget to smash that like button and make sure to subscribe for more heartwarming and fun dog stories every day. Officer Haley Stanton was never one to ignore her instincts, no matter how small the situation seemed. That's why during a routine patrol with her partner Jason Green, something strange caught her attention and made her gut clench. It started as a simple morning, a routine check in their district. The sun was barely up and the crisp air had yet to warm. The two officers had decided to stop by a convenience store to grab a quick coffee to shake off the sleepiness clinging to them. "Just a grab and go," Haley had said, stepping out of the car as Jason leaned back in his seat. "You want anything?" "A coffee would be great. The stronger the better," Jason replied with a sleepy grin. Neither of them had any idea that their ordinary day was about to take an extraordinary turn. Inside the store, Haley exchanged pleasantries with Wilson, the clerk, someone she saw regularly on her patrols. As the familiar sound of the coffee machine started whirring, something else reached Haley's ears, a faint but eerie sound coming from the alleyway behind the store. It was a strange sort of howling, distant yet piercing enough to cut through the morning stillness. Her brows furrowed as she turned to Wilson. "What's that sound?" she asked, her tone cautious but curious. Wilson's expression stiffened, his hands pausing for a brief second before continuing with the coffee preparation. "Oh, it's just a stray dog hanging around, probably hungry. One of the other clerks gave it some food and now it won't leave," he explained, though the nervous quiver in his voice didn't go unnoticed by Haley. Though Wilson's answer seemed plausible, Haley's cop instinct nagged at her. Something wasn't right, but she didn't press the issue, not yet. After grabbing the coffees and a sandwich, she returned to the car, her mind still lingering on the odd noise. But as she handed Jason his coffee, she heard it again, louder this time. The same unsettling sound, more urgent, more pressing, and now she couldn't shake the feeling that something needed her attention. It gnawed at her, insisting that she couldn't just drive away. "Something's going on back there," Haley said suddenly, already making up her mind. "I'm going to check it out." Jason raised an eyebrow but nodded, sipping his coffee as he watched her head back towards the alley. "Be quick, though. We've got rounds to do." Haley's curiosity was pulling her towards the back of the store now. As she rounded the corner, her suspicions were confirmed. A gray Staffordshire Bull Terrier stood rigid near the back of the store, barking fiercely, its attention fixed on an old, crumpled brown paper bag lying in the dirt. But this wasn't just any ordinary bark. It was protective, defensive, like the dog was guarding something important. "Hey there, buddy," Haley called softly, trying not to startle the dog as she took a tentative step closer. The dog's eyes shot toward her, its body tense, teeth bared slightly, growling deeply in its throat. It wasn't going to let her get any closer without a fight. There was something in that bag, something important enough for the dog to risk confronting a stranger. Haley knew she had to be careful, but she also knew she couldn't leave without investigating. The dog wasn't just randomly guarding trash, it was trying to protect whatever was inside. She reached for her radio. "Jason, I'm going to need some help back here. There's a dog guarding something, it's acting pretty defensive." Jason responded quickly, his footsteps echoing down the alleyway as he joined Haley. His eyes quickly scanned the situation. "What's the plan?" he asked, his tone serious. "I don't know yet," Haley replied, her gaze never leaving the dog. "But we've got to figure out what's in that bag." Jason suggested calling animal control, but Haley, always one to trust her instincts, thought they could handle it themselves for now. The dog seemed more scared and protective than aggressive. Maybe they could lure it away. Jason nodded, scanning the area. His eyes landed on a discarded sandwich wrapper on the ground, and an idea sparked. "Maybe food will do the trick," he said, bending down to grab the wrapper. Haley handed Jason her sandwich, the one she had planned to eat before all this started. "Try this," she said, hoping the scent of food would distract the dog long enough for them to take a look inside the bag. Slowly, Jason approached the dog, holding the sandwich out as a peace offering. "Easy there, buddy, look what I've got," he said in a soothing voice, inching closer. The dog's growl softened as its nose twitched, catching the scent of the food. Its focus shifted from Haley to Jason, its attention now fixated on the sandwich in his hand. Jason took a few careful steps backward, leading the dog away from the bag. Haley seized the opportunity. With the dog distracted, she moved quickly toward the bag. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crouched down and unzipped it, unsure of what she was about to find. Inside the bag, nestled among some rags, was a small, frail kitten, barely moving. Its eyes were half closed, and its tiny body shivered from the cold. Haley's breath caught in her throat. The kitten looked malnourished and weak, clinging to life by a thread. "Oh, you poor thing," Haley whispered, gently reaching in to scoop the kitten up. It let out a faint mew, barely audible, as if even that small sound took all the energy it had left. But that wasn't all. As Haley adjusted the kitten in her arms, her fingers brushed against something else inside the bag. Small, tightly wrapped packages. Her eyes widened as realization hit her. Contraband. Drugs by the look of it. "Jason," Haley called out, her voice trembling, "you need to see this." Jason glanced over his shoulder, still keeping the dog's attention with the sandwich. When he saw the look on Haley's face, his heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Haley lifted the bag slightly, showing him the wrapped packages beneath the kitten. "It's not just about the kitten. There's more. A lot more." Jason's eyes narrowed as he processed the situation. The kitten, the contraband, the protective dog, it was all connected somehow, and whatever it was big. "We need to call this in," Jason said, his tone serious now. "This is turning into something much bigger than we thought." Haley nodded, her mind racing, but before they could make the call, the dog, sensing that something was happening, began barking again, louder this time, its attention turning back to Haley and the kitten. The sudden noise startled the kitten in Haley's arms, making it squirm weakly. Jason acted fast, making the call to animal control while Haley tried to soothe both the dog and the kitten. Within minutes, backup arrived. Animal control officers were able to safely secure the dog, and the kitten was taken into their care. But the story didn't end there. Haley's thoughts lingered on the kitten's collar. There had been an address on it, worn but still legible. It was a clue, one that could lead them to whoever was responsible for abandoning the kitten and, more importantly, for the contraband. "We need to check out that address," Haley said to Jason as they watched the animal control officers drive away. Jason agreed, and they wasted no time heading to the location. As they pulled up to the house, a sense of unease settled over them. The neighborhood was run down, the houses in varying states of disrepair. The address led them to a dilapidated home with peeling paint and a sagging porch. This was the place. Haley knocked on the door, her nerves on edge. Jason stood beside her, ready for anything. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a man with a hardened expression. He eyed the officers warily. "What do you want?" he asked, gruffly, his eyes darting between them. Haley held up the kitten's collar. "We're here about a kitten. This address is on the collar, and we found it in a dangerous situation." The man's expression shifted slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know anything about a kitten," he said, his voice flat. But Haley wasn't convinced. She could see the nervousness in his eyes, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He was hiding something. "Can we come in?" Haley asked, her tone firm but not aggressive. The man hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, the house was dimly lit, cluttered with old furniture and boxes stacked in the corners. Haley and Jason exchanged a glance, their instincts telling them that something was off. "We need to speak with your niece," Jason said, remembering what the man had mentioned earlier. "She might know more about the kitten." The man sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine, follow me." He led them to a small room at the back of the house where a young girl, around 12 or 13, sat on the bed. Her eyes widened when she saw the officers. "Maddie, these officers need to ask you some questions," the man said, his tone softening slightly. Maddie looked at her uncle, then back at Haley and Jason, her expression nervous. "It's okay," Haley said gently. "We just want to know about the kitten." Maddie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I found it outside," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was all alone and I didn't know what to do. I tried to take care of it, but my uncle didn't want it in the house." Haley's heart ached for the girl. It was clear she had tried to do the right thing, but her circumstances had made it difficult. "Why didn't your uncle want the kitten here?" Jason asked, his tone gentle but firm. Maddie glanced at her uncle, then back at the officers. "He said we couldn't keep it, that there wasn't any room for pets." Haley and Jason exchanged a look. There was more to the story. They could feel it, but they needed to tread carefully. "Did your uncle say why?" Haley pressed, her eyes never leaving Maddie's face. Maddie bit her lip, glancing nervously at her uncle again. I don't know. He just told me to get rid of it." Haley nodded, sensing that Maddie wasn't telling them the whole truth. But they couldn't push her too hard, not yet. "We're going to need to speak with your uncle again," Jason said, turning to the man who had been watching them closely from the doorway. The man crossed his arms, his expression defensive. "I already told you, I don't know anything about the kitten." But as Haley and Jason continued to question him, his resolve began to crack. Eventually, he admitted that he had been involved in something much bigger, something dangerous. "I didn't want the kitten here because I was holding on to some things I shouldn't have been," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't think the kitten would stick around, but I guess I was wrong." Haley and Jason exchanged a glance. They were getting closer to the truth, but they needed more information. They pressed the man further, eventually uncovering the full extent of his involvement with a local gang. It turned out that the contraband they had found with the kitten was part of a larger operation, a drug trafficking ring that had been using innocent animals to transport their goods. The man had been forced to hold on to the contraband, but when the kitten wandered too close to it, he had panicked and abandoned both the animal and the drugs. With this new information, Haley and Jason knew they had to act fast. They contacted their precinct and relayed everything they had learned. A raid was quickly organized, targeting the gang's hideouts and securing the evidence they needed to bring them down. The operation was a success. Several arrests were made, and the gang's activities were shut down for good. As for the kitten, it recovered well under the care of animal control and was soon reunited with Maddie, who had never stopped worrying about it. Haley and Jason returned to the precinct, exhausted but triumphant. Their instincts had been right, and their determination had paid off. As they sat down to debrief with their captain, Haley couldn't help but smile. "We did it," she said, glancing at Jason. "Yeah," Jason replied, a grin spreading across his face. "We did." The kitten's story had turned out to be more than just a tale of abandonment. It had led them to a major criminal operation, one that would no longer threaten the safety of their city. And as Haley reflected on the events of the day, she knew that sometimes even the smallest creatures could make the biggest difference. The following week, Haley couldn't shake the feeling of everything that had transpired. The small, frail kitten, the protective dog, the strange man, and the chilling discovery of the contraband. It was a case that had seemed to grow larger with each turn. As she sat at her desk back at the precinct, she found herself thinking about Maddie. The girl's wide, fearful eyes haunted her thoughts, and Haley couldn't help but wonder about her situation. Jason, sitting across from her, seemed to be thinking along the same lines. "You know, we've shut down the gang, made the arrests, but that girl, she was scared, Hales. There's more to her story than we uncovered." Haley nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "Yeah, I felt it too. I don't think it's over for her just because we got her uncle. She's still in that house, with who knows what going on behind closed doors. I'm not sure I trust him to protect her, or even look out for her well-being. She's a kid after all. Maybe we should do a follow-up. Child Protective Services might need to be involved," Jason suggested. "We can't just leave her there without making sure she's safe." Haley agreed, and within the hour, they made the necessary calls to have CPS evaluate Maddie's living situation. After all, her uncle had been deeply involved with a dangerous gang, and the pressure he had placed on Maddie to lie about the kitten and contraband weighed heavily on them both. They knew she was just a scared child, but they wanted to make sure that she wouldn't be pulled into something darker or more dangerous down the line. CPS responded quickly, promising to visit Maddie's home to assess her living conditions. Haley and Jason offered their insight from the investigation, noting Maddie's obvious fear and reluctance to speak openly about what had happened. But despite their focus on Maddie's well-being, the kitten still lingered in their thoughts too. That small, innocent creature had been caught up in something so much bigger than it should have been. Haley found herself reaching out to the Animal Control Center to check on the kitten's condition. Thankfully, the kitten had recovered well. It was a little fighter, determined to pull through despite its rough start. "Do you think Maddie will want to keep it?" Jason asked as they left the precinct that day. "She seemed really attached to it." "I think she would," Haley replied, "but I'm not sure if it's safe for her in that house. Maybe it's better off in a home where it can be loved without any danger." Jason was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I was thinking maybe we should try to find a good family for it, or maybe you should consider taking it." Haley glanced at Jason, startled by the suggestion. "Me? You think I should adopt the kitten?" He shrugged, giving her a small grin. "Why not? You've got a soft spot for the little guy, and let's be real, Hales, you're a sucker for animals in need." Haley laughed, shaking her head. "I don't know, Jason. I've never had a cat before. It feels like a big responsibility." "Big responsibility, sure, but you could use a little company, you know. And besides, this kitten clearly has a special place in your heart already." Haley didn't say anything at first, but the thought lingered in her mind. The idea of adopting the kitten seemed daunting at first, but maybe Jason was right. She lived alone, and the idea of having a pet, especially one she had helped rescue, didn't seem so far-fetched. A few days later, the CPS report came in. Maddie's situation wasn't as dire as they had initially feared, but it was far from ideal. Her uncle wasn't directly abusive, but his neglectful behavior and involvement in dangerous activities had created an unsafe environment for her. CPS offered Maddie counseling and support, but they couldn't remove her from the home without more evidence of abuse. Haley felt a pang of frustration. She had wanted to help Maddie, but there was only so much they could do within the confines of the law. However, she made a personal promise to keep an eye on the girl, to make sure that she wasn't left to fend for herself in a place that might drag her down into something dark. Meanwhile, the kitten story was far from over. The Animal Control Center had successfully rehabilitated it, and they were now looking for a permanent home. Haley had visited the center twice since the rescue, and each time she found herself growing more attached to the little creature. It had survived so much, yet it was still so gentle and trusting. One afternoon, while sitting in her patrol car, Haley made the decision. She pulled out her phone and called the center. "Hey, it's Officer Stanton. I was wondering if the kitten we brought in is still available for adoption." The staff member on the other end of the line smiled through the phone. "Yes, Officer Stanton. The kitten is doing great. Were you thinking about taking it home?" Haley hesitated for only a moment before responding. "Yeah, I think I'd like to adopt it." The process was smooth, and within a few days, Haley found herself driving home with a small carrier in the passenger seat, a fluffy ball of fur nestled inside. She named the kitten Lucky, a fitting name for an animal that had survived such an ordeal. When she introduced Lucky to her home, the kitten seemed to explore cautiously at first, but soon it was racing around, chasing invisible objects and batting at the ends of Haley's curtains. Watching the kitten play, Haley felt an unexpected sense of peace. It was a small comfort in a world that often seemed chaotic and dangerous, but it was a comfort nonetheless. A few weeks later, Haley and Jason received a call from the precinct's captain. They were needed to follow up on another lead connected to the gang they had taken down. The operation wasn't as fully dismantled as they had hoped. There were still members at large, and they were linked to other criminal activities in the city. It seemed their work wasn't over. The raid had been a success in taking out the core of the operation. But gangs were like weeds. If you didn't pull out the roots, they always grew back. The loose ends from the operation lingered like a cloud over Haley and Jason, and they knew it would take more effort to fully eliminate the threat. For days, they worked long hours, chasing leads, gathering evidence, and coordinating with other teams. It was grueling work, but both of them were determined to see it through. They owed it to the people in their city, to the victims who had suffered at the hands of the gang, and to Maddie, who had unknowingly gotten wrapped up in a dangerous situation. One evening, after a particularly long shift, Haley returned home exhausted but was greeted by Lucky, who meowed softly and rubbed against her legs. As she picked him up, she realized how much joy the little kitten had brought into her life. Lucky had given her a reason to smile even on the toughest days. It was moments like these that reminded her why she did what she did, why she put herself in danger, why she fought so hard to protect others. It wasn't about the arrests or the accolades. It was about making the world a little bit safer. One person, one animal, one case at a time. The gang case eventually came to a close. Haley and Jason had played a crucial role in bringing down the remaining members, and the precinct celebrated their hard work with a small ceremony. But for Haley, the real victory was the knowledge that Maddie was safe, that the kitten was thriving, and that she had done her part in making her corner of the world just a little bit better. As she stood in her living room watching Lucky chase a ball of yarn across the floor, she smiled. The world could be a dark place, but there were always moments of light, moments of hope, and that was what kept her going. With a sigh of contentment, Haley settled onto the couch, Lucky curling up beside her. For the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to relax. The case was closed, the kitten was safe, and for now all was well.